The vastness of space was silent, yet it was brimming with tension. Far above Earth, in the cold void of the cosmos, a mighty fleet of alien ships hovered in orbit. These ships were not just advanced, they were beyond anything humanity had ever imagined. Their sleek metal bodies gleamed under distant stars, and their weapons were more destructive than anything Earth could ever hope to defend against. This was the greatest invasion the galaxy had ever seen. Commander Vrax, leader of the Galactic Fleet, sat at the helm of the flagship, his gaze fixed on the blue-green planet below. His face, though alien, betrayed a sense of calm confidence. He had led his fleet to countless victories across the galaxy. Planets had fallen before him like wheat before a scythe. His enemies never stood a chance, and he had no reason to believe that Earth would be any different. "We will crush them," Vrax muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing as he watched Earth's defiant blue oceans and swirling clouds. "The humans have no idea what's coming." His officers stood by his side, silent and awaiting orders. The fleet's advanced sensors had already scanned the planet, confirming that Earth had some form of civilization, but nothing that posed any real threat. No advanced weapons, no defensive structures capable of withstanding the fleet's might. It was clear that humanity was nothing more than a primitive species, vulnerable and unaware of the impending doom. "Prepare for descent," Vrax commanded. The alien fleet began its slow approach to Earth. As they entered the planet's atmosphere, Vrax felt a slight shudder in the ship's hull. The blue planet below was growing larger and larger, but it still appeared fragile like a pearl on the edge of the abyss. In all his years of conquering worlds, he had never encountered a species that did not crumble before his might. Earth's resistance would be crushed swiftly, just like all the others before it. But something strange happened. A transmission, almost too faint to notice, crackled through the communications system. It wasn't a plea for mercy, as Vrax expected. It wasn't the begging or crying he had heard from countless other civilizations when they realized they were UTMATCHED. This message was ... different. "Humanity grins," the transmission said, a calm, almost mocking tone in the voice. "We are not the weaklings you think we are." Vrax's brow furrowed. He leaned forward, squinting at the comm screen, trying to make sense of the message. This was ... strange. Humanity was supposed to be afraid. Their panic was supposed to signal the end of their resistance. But instead, they were ... challenging him. He called out to his officer, "What is this? Analyze the signal now." The officer hurried to his station, tapping on his controls. The words on the screen flickered, translating the strange human language. "It appears to be a challenge, Commander. They are not asking for mercy. They're mocking us." Vrax's eyes narrowed. "Mocking us?" He repeated the words with a hint of disbelief. How dare they? He had faced countless enemies, but none had ever dared mock him or his fleet. "How quaint," Vrax said, his voice dripping with contempt. "A species that has no idea of the power they are up against. Very well, let them play their little game." He turned to his officers. "Proceed with the invasion as planned. We will show them the folly of their defiance. No mercy, no retreat." His officers nodded, and the fleet moved in closer. The massive ships descended upon Earth's surface, their shadow casting over entire cities. The inhabitants below had no idea what was about to happen. The world's leaders had tried to prepare for some kind of alien contact, but nothing could have prepared them for the sheer scale of what was coming. No one expected this. As Vrax's fleet neared Earth's atmosphere, he couldn't shake the strange feeling that the humans weren't just scared, they were ready for something. Maybe not victory, but certainly something far more dangerous than the commander had imagined. But even with that nagging feeling, he knew Earth would fall. All they needed was a taste of true power. His ship's descent was smooth, but there was an unease building inside him. He had never been questioned like this. He had never been challenged, without a fight. Then, just as they neared the atmosphere, the signal came again. It wasn't a plea for mercy. It wasn't a warning. It was the same message, only clearer this time. "We grinned," it said again, "and we will show you why." Vrax stood frozen. For the first time in his entire career, doubt crept into his mind. What was this human race truly capable of? Could they have prepared for an invasion like this? Had they developed some hidden weapon, or were they truly as foolish as they appeared? His fingers tapped the controls of his ship, and he quickly ordered the fleet to prepare for full combat readiness. "Prepare for attack," Vrax barked. "Earth will fall within the hour." He turned his gaze back to the planet below, his confidence renewed, but the nagging thought refused to leave him. Were these humans really as weak as they seemed? As the alien fleet closed in on the defenseless world, They were about to learn the hard way that humanity's defiance would not be so easily destroyed. The challenge had been issued, and now, the real battle would begin. The fleet hovered above Earth, its shadow stretching across the cities below like a dark omen. For Commander Vrax, this was just another conquest, another world to subdue and add to his ever-expanding empire. Yet, there was something about this planet, something about the humans that gnawed at the edges of his confidence. The transmission had rattled him, but he dismissed it as a meaningless distraction. After all, no species, no matter how clever or resilient, could stand against the might of his fleet. Theirs was a force unparalleled in the galaxy, their technology far beyond anything Earth had ever dreamed of. They would simply land, destroy any opposition, and claim the planet as their own. But as the fleet began its descent into Earth's atmosphere, Vrax couldn't shake the eerie feeling in the pit of his stomach. It was the small things that bothered him, the way the human transmission had echoed in his mind, the strange, unwavering defiance in their words. They grinned. The humans actually grinned in the face of their doom. He refocused his attention on the task at hand, pushing aside the thought. The humans are no match for us, he muttered to himself, though his words felt hollow now. The fleet's massive engines rumbled as they cut through the atmosphere, their heat shields glowing a dull red as they entered Earth's lower atmosphere. The world below looked so fragile, tiny blue oceans, vast green expanses, and swirling clouds that seemed so soft, like a toy for the taking. His fleet was unstoppable. The weaponry they possessed could reduce entire cities to rubble in mere seconds. Their plasma cannons could incinerate any opposition. Yet, as the alien ships descended, their massive forms blocking out the sun, something strange happened. It wasn't the booming sound of missiles or the crashing of buildings that came first. It wasn't the panicked screams of humans. No, it was something far more subtle. It was a quiet, almost imperceptible hum, a strange frequency that began to vibrate through the ship's hulls. For a moment Vrax's fingers twitched over the controls, his eyes narrowing. It was unlike anything he had felt before. It was almost human. His mind snapped back to the task at hand. There was no time for distractions. Initiate ground assault, he ordered. The fleet's landing crafts deployed, sending a wave of sleek, heavily armed ships to the surface. They cut through the atmosphere with pinpoint precision, heading straight for the major cities. The alien soldiers inside were ready, their weapons primed, their armor shining like dark steel. The humans wouldn't even know what hit them. As the ships landed, the soldiers disembarked, their boots hitting the ground with a resounding thud. They were met with a strange silence. The cities below were not bustling with the chaos Vrax had expected. Instead, they were eerily calm. The streets were empty, no soldiers, no weapons, no resistance, just silence. Vrax's eyes flickered with a mixture of annoyance and curiosity. Where were the humans? Where was their defense? The transmissions had indicated that the humans were expecting them, but this was not the resistance he had imagined. He had expected them to scramble, to fight back with desperation. But all he saw was stillness. The silence was suffocating. He turned to his officers. "Where is the human resistance?" he demanded. One of his lieutenants, an officer named Su, glanced nervously at the empty streets. "They must be preparing for an ambush, Commander," he said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Perhaps they are waiting for us to make the first move," Vrax growled, his impatience growing. "There is no ambush. They are not prepared. They will be crushed under the weight of our power." His fleet began to advance, their heavy footsteps reverberating across the empty streets. Yet, even as they marched forward, Vrax couldn't shake the strange feeling that something was wrong. He had invaded hundreds of planets, yet he had never encountered such an eerie silence. No civilians ran for cover. No soldiers came to confront them. And then, just as he was about to dismiss his doubts, the first human weapon was fired. It wasn't a missile, nor was it anything he had expected. A sudden, sharp noise cracked through the air. At first it sounded like a simple explosion, but it was more than that. It was a blast of sound, like a shockwave, and it hit the alien soldiers like a physical blow. They staggered back, some falling to the ground, their heads ringing with the intensity of the blast. Vrax's eyes widened in disbelief. What was this? A weapon? "Report," he barked. Sorek quickly checked the data on his screen. "It appears to be a sonic pulse, Commander. It's like nothing we've ever encountered before. The energy level is beyond what we expected." "Impossible," Vrax spat. "Humans couldn't possibly have developed something like this." Yet, as the sonic waves continued to pulse, the alien soldiers were forced to retreat. Their advanced armor, designed to withstand plasma blasts and kinetic forces, could not protect them from the deafening shockwave. The humans were fighting back, not with brute force, but with their ingenuity, their ability to surprise and adapt. Vrax's mind raced. This was not the Earth he had expected. The humans were not weak. They were not defenseless. They were smart, and they were using that to their advantage. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath their feet. The alien forces were caught off guard again, as human fighters, small, agile ships emerged from hidden bunkers beneath the cities. These ships were old, seemingly primitive, but they were fast and dangerous. They swarmed around the alien fleet, darting in and out of the massive ships, launching attacks with pinpoint precision. It was guerrilla warfare at its finest. The humans weren't running or hiding, they were fighting back with everything they had. Every shot they fired, every strike they made, seemed to catch the fleet off guard. The sheer unpredictability of their tactics was unlike anything Vrax had ever seen. "Commander," one of his officers shouted, "the humans have set up a defensive perimeter. We're losing ground." Vrax's grip tightened on the command console. This was not the invasion he had envisioned. This was a challenge. And for the first time in his long career, Vrax wasn't sure who would come out on top. That the humans grinned. And now, Vrax had no choice but to face the truth. They were not as helpless as he had believed. The battle for Earth had only just begun. The battle raged on as the fleet's massive ships clashed with the unexpected fury of humanity's resistance. The skies above Earth were filled with streaks of light as human fighters darted in and out of the alien vessels, evading blasts and firing back with relentless precision. The sonic pulses, though initially a surprise, had only been the beginning. Humanity, it seemed, had more tricks up its sleeve. Commander Vrax stood at the helm of his flagship, watching the chaos unfold below. His once unshakable confidence was now replaced by annoying unease. The humans had been underestimated, and now they were showing him just how dangerous that mistake could be. His fleet had faced many enemies, but none like this. Their technology was advanced, yes, but it wasn't just their weapons that were making them formidable, it was their adaptability. The humans were resourceful, using every inch of their world to strike back at the invaders. "Commander," his Lieutenant Sorik called out urgently, "our fleet is being overwhelmed. The human forces are relentless. They've managed to disable 5 of our ships, and the smaller fighters are targeting our blind spots. We can't keep up at this rate." Vrax's eyes narrowed. He had expected resistance, but not this level of coordination, not this sheer will to survive. The humans weren't fighting like a species on the brink of extinction. They were fighting as if they had something to prove. They weren't just defending their planet, they were defending their pride. "Reinforce the perimeter," Vrax ordered, his voice cold. "We will not retreat, we will crush them." The fleet, though massive, was becoming sluggish in comparison to the agile human forces. The alien warships were designed for brute force and overwhelming firepower, not speed. But the human fighters, small and nimble, used the terrain to their advantage, darting through buildings and clouds of smoke, launching hit-and-run attacks before disappearing back into the chaos. They were like ghosts, impossible to pin down. Then, just as the fleet prepared for a counter-offensive, the ground below them erupted. It wasn't a bomb, nor was it some secret weapon the humans had hidden. It was something far simpler, yet devastating in its effect. A massive shockwave rippled across the planet, originating from deep within the Earth itself. The alien ships shook, their hulls vibrating violently as if the very ground beneath them was alive. The shockwave, a series of underground explosions, disrupted the fleet's systems, throwing the ships into disarray. Communications scrambled, targeting systems faltered, and the fleet's advance was halted for crucial moments. "What in the galaxy is going on?" Vrax demanded, his voice rising in anger. Sorik quickly checked the data, his face turning pale. "It's an underground network of explosives, Commander. The humans have rigged the entire planet with seismic charges. Every major city, every military base, they've wired the core of the planet itself." Vrax's mind raced. The humans had set traps, buried beneath their cities and even beneath the ground itself. It was a level of preparedness he had never imagined. The fleet had expected bombs, but nothing like this. Nothing so intricate, so deeply woven into the very fabric of the planet. "They've been planning this for decades," Sorik murmured. "They knew we would come." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their implications. The humans had anticipated the invasion, not just the immediate attack, but the very possibility of defeat. They had prepared for this moment long before the fleet had even made its way across the galaxy. Vrax clenched his fists, seething with frustration. This wasn't just a battle, this was a test of wills, a clash of ideologies. and the humans were not backing down. As the shockwaves continued to pulse through the ground, the fleet's commanders scrambled to regain control. The alien warships began to circle, attempting to get a grip on the situation. But the human fighters were already closing in, taking advantage of the momentary confusion to launch another round of strikes. Their small, fast ships zipped past the alien vessels, firing targeted blasts at weak points in the ship's hulls. Vrax's flagship took a hit. It wasn't a direct shot to the core, but the impact was enough to send a ripple through the ship. The lights flickered, and the ship's interior groaned under the stress. Vrax's grip tightened on the console. This was no longer a simple conquest. This was a war, and the humans weren't about to let him win. He turned to his second-in-command, his voice hard with command. "Send in the reserves, we need to push them back now." As the reserves moved into position, Vrax began to wonder if he had misjudged the humans. He had seen their planet from space, fragile, seemingly primitive. Their cities appeared small, their defenses non-existent. But now, this was different. The humans had unleashed chaos, and they were doing it with a terrifying level of precision. Vrax had thought of them as a species on the brink of extinction, easily wiped away by superior technology. Instead, they were proving to be a force to be reckoned with, one that refused to submit, even when the odds were stacked against them. Just as the reserves began to regroup, the shockwaves started again. This time they were accompanied by a new, unsettling phenomenon. The very air seemed to thrum with energy, a deep hum that reverberated through Vrax's bones. The human forces had begun to deploy their hidden weapon, their final, most terrifying surprise. A beam of light shot up from the ground, rising into the sky like a giant spear. It was a brilliant, blinding light, cutting through the atmosphere. The beam seemed to draw power from the planet itself, the energy building to an unbearable intensity. "Commander, what is that?" Sorek asked, his voice laced with fear. Vrax stared at the beam, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. A weapon? No. This was something more. This was an embodiment of humanity's resilience, a last-ditch effort to turn the tide of the battle. It was a symbol that the humans had not just prepared for this invasion, they had prepared to destroy it, to take down anyone who dared to challenge them. The beam reached its peak, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The fleet was suspended in time, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Then, with a deafening roar, the beam unleashed its full force, and in that instant, Vrax realized the truth. The humans were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for something much bigger. They were fighting for their future, their world, and their pride, and they would not be defeated easily. The atmosphere on Vrax's flagship had shifted from one of controlled authority to a tense, uncertain silence. The blinding beam of light, which had burst from the Earth's surface like a spear aimed directly at the heart of the fleet, had forced the entire alien armada to halt in its tracks. The humans were no longer retreating, no longer hiding. They were now fighting back in a way Vrax had never seen before, fiercely, relentlessly, and with a chilling sense of purpose. Vrax stood at the observation window, staring down at the surface of the planet, the beam still glowing faintly in the distance. The energy it emitted was unlike anything the fleet had encountered. It was as if the Earth itself had come alive, its very core awakening in defense of its inhabitants. But what did it mean? Could the humans truly harness the power of their planet? Could they really be so advanced in ways the fleet had completely overlooked? The quiet hum of the bridge was broken by the voice of his science officer. "Commander, we've analyzed the energy signatures. The beam it's not just a weapon. It's a power source, something that taps directly into Earth's core energy. It's drawing on geothermal activity, potentially even the planet's magnetic field." Vrax's jaw tightened. "They've harnessed the planet itself." His voice was low, filled with disbelief. "Yes, Commander. It seems they've been preparing for this very moment for centuries. The power they're channeling is immense. If this continues, their energy output could rival our own." Vrax's mind raced as he turned back toward the view of the planet. Earth was supposed to be a simple, primitive world, a place ripe for conquest. Instead, it was showing its true colors. The humans were not helpless creatures waiting to be dominated. They were survivors, intelligent beyond anything Vrax had assumed. They had spent centuries preparing for this, perhaps for multiple invasions, and now they were using everything at their disposal. He clenched his fists. There was no turning back now. The invasion was already underway, and the humans had shown they would not go down without a fight. But what else could they have hidden? What other surprises did this planet hold? And more importantly, how far were they willing to go to protect their world? Suddenly, an explosion rocked the ship, and the lights flickered. The entire command center lurched as if something massive had struck. Vrax stumbled, regaining his footing quickly as the officers around him scrambled to assess the situation. Report. Vrax barked, his patience thinning. Sorek. His lieutenant looked up from his console, a grim look on his face. We've been hit by a concentrated burst from the surface. It's not just energy, it's a wave of electromagnetic force. It's disrupting our systems. Communications are down, and our weapons are malfunctioning. The blast came from one of the human military sites that we thought was abandoned. Vax's heart skipped a beat. They had believed the humans were fighting with limited resources, but now it seemed they had secret arsenals hidden across the globe. What kind of defenses were they really dealing with? How many surprises were buried beneath the surface? Activate all remaining shields, Vrax ordered. We can't afford to lose any more ships. Launch countermeasures, now. His voice was unwavering, but inside, a sense of dread had begun to grow. The humans had turned the battlefield against them with weapons Vrax hadn't even known existed. They had underestimated them, and now, the consequences were clear. Commander, Sorek said again, his voice strained. We've detected something else. A massive force is building beneath the surface. We think it's another weapon, something even larger than the beam we saw earlier. Vrax's stomach churned. How large, we can't say for certain, but the readings indicate it's on a scale we've never encountered. It's as though they've taken a page from our own playbook, Commander. They've learned to use their planet's natural resources in ways we never thought possible. Vrax slammed his fist against the console, frustration and anger boiling over. How could they be so prepared, he muttered. We should have known. We should have. A sudden blast of static filled the command center, and the screen in front of him flickered to life, displaying a human broadcast. The voice that came through was unmistakable, calm, composed, but carrying a weight of defiance that cut through the tension of the battlefield. To the leaders of the Galactic Fleet, the voice began, the words carrying across every communication channel. We are humans, and we will not be subjugated. Our planet is not yours to conquer, and we will fight to protect our home, our families, and our future. You underestimated us. But now, you will see the true strength of humanity. The broadcast cut out abruptly, leaving only static, but the words lingered in Vrax's mind, and something in his chest tightened. Humanity's strength wasn't in their technology, their weapons, or their sheer numbers. It was in their spirit, their unyielding will to survive and protect. That was what made them dangerous, not their resources or their planet, but the depth of their resolve. Sorek turned to Vrax, his face filled with concern. Commander, what do we do now? They've shown us everything they have. They won't stop fighting. They will use every advantage they can. Vrax took a deep breath, his mind spinning. He had faced countless challenges, but this was unlike anything he had ever encountered. The humans had forced him into a corner, and there was no clear way out. We adapt, Vrax said finally, his voice steady. We don't fight them on their terms. We take the battle to them. We use everything we have left, and we show them the price of defiance. As he spoke, his eyes drifted back to Earth below, his thoughts racing. The humans had grinned when they sent their challenge. Now, it was his turn to show them just how far he was willing to go. The invasion was no longer just about conquering a planet. It was about defeating an idea force of will unlike anything the galaxy had seen. And as long as he drew breath, Commander Vrax would see it through to the bitter end. The battle had taken a turn that even Vrax, seasoned in the ways of conquest, could not have foreseen. His fleet, once poised for swift victory, now found itself ensnared in a struggle that tested every facet of their superiority. Was no longer a mere inconvenience, it was a force to be reckoned with. The planet's defenders were not only exploiting their environment, but they were using their very survival instinct to outwit and outmaneuver the most advanced military force the galaxy had ever seen. Vrax's flagship hovered above the smoldering remains of what had once been a bustling human city. The landscape below was scarred with the aftermath of relentless bombing and violent skirmishes. Yet, in the midst of this destruction, humanity had refused to break. The air still crackled with the sound of human fighter jets zipping through the sky, dodging alien fire and retaliating with pinpoint accuracy. The war wasn't over, not by a long shot. And now, Commander Vrax was beginning to realize that, the more they fought, the more the humans seemed to understand the game. Commander Sorek's voice crackled through the intercom, filled with tension. We've detected something new, a fleet of human warships, nothing we've seen before. They're emerging from the shadows, from beneath the ocean. Vrax turned to face his lieutenant, his eyes narrowed underwater. Are you telling me they've been hiding entire fleets beneath the ocean this entire time? Yes, Commander, we've only just detected them, but they appear to be fully armed and ready for combat. Vrax's mind raced. How had they hidden them? The humans had no advanced cloaking technology, no hidden bases at least, none that he had been able to detect, and yet, they had been biding their time, building a fleet beneath the very surface of their oceans, a fleet that was now emerging with an eerie calmness, as if they had been waiting for this moment. Activate scans. I want every detail on those ships, Vrax ordered. He couldn't afford to be caught off guard again. The human resolve was powerful, but he still held the upper hand in terms of numbers. They could not sustain this resistance forever. As the scans came in, Sorik's face turned pale. These ships there, equipped with energy weapons, and they're utilizing a hybrid propulsion system. It's unlike anything we've seen before, and there's something else. Their shields, they seem to be generating a powerful counterforce to our weaponry. Vrax clenched his fists. So they've developed technology to counter our weaponry. Impressive, but not unbeatable. He paused, thinking for a moment. Let's test their defenses. But before Vrax could issue further orders, the ground shook once again. A massive tremor rippled through the flagship, knocking everyone off balance. The sensors began flashing red. An incoming missile human-made was hurtling toward the fleet with unimaginable speed. There was no time to dodge, no time to react. The missile slammed into one of the fleet's destroyers, sending shockwaves through the atmosphere. The explosion sent debris flying into the air, and the ship was instantly reduced to nothing but ashes. Vrax's heart skipped a beat. The humans were learning. They had studied their enemies, adapting quickly, finding ways to disrupt even the most advanced alien technology. The bomb had been designed to pierce their shields, using a unique frequency that disrupted their energy fields. It was clear now that the humans had been developing weapons specifically tailored to defeat the Galactic Fleet. Commander Sorik shouted, fear evident in his voice. They're targeting our weak points. We have to retreat. This isn't just a fight for the planet anymore. They're going after our entire fleet. Vrax's mind was spinning. This was not a typical invasion. The humans had turned their desperation into innovation, their fear into a weapon. They were no longer just defending themselves, they were actively hunting down the fleet, cutting off their ability to retaliate, one ship at a time. But retreat was not an option. Not yet. We'll need to fight smarter, Vrax growled. Prepare the fleet to regroup. I want full evasive maneuvers, and focus all fire on their new fleet. We can't let them surround us. As the alien warships adjusted their formations, a chilling realization struck Vrax. The humans weren't just fighting to protect their home, they were fighting for something more. They were fighting for the future of their species. It was as though they understood that this moment, this very battle, determined whether their civilization would continue or be wiped out by a force far superior. They weren't simply using weapons, they were using the planet itself as a shield, pulling every available resource into their efforts. They weren't playing by the rules of war that Vrax had expected. They were changing the game, and that made them dangerous. In the heart of the battlefield, the humans continued their assault, not with brute strength, but with cleverness and precision. Their warships darted in and out of the alien fleet, each move calculated, each strike a direct challenge to the invaders' superiority. Earth's defenses, once thought to be primitive, had turned the tide. They had transformed their planet into a fortress, and Vrax's fleet was struggling to breach it. Commander Sorik said, his voice urgent, we've lost more ships. They're relentless. The human fleet is pushing us back toward their atmosphere. We're cornered. Vrax's eyes burned with frustration. This was not how it was supposed to go. He had seen the power of his fleet bend worlds to their will. Yet here, in the face of human defiance, he found himself questioning everything he had known about conquest. The humans were not just fighting, they were teaching him a lesson. And for once, he wasn't sure if it was a lesson he could afford to learn. He turned his gaze back to the Earth below. The planet was no longer the fragile, vulnerable world he had once believed it to be. It had become a bastion of resistance, a symbol of the strength and resilience of humanity. The humans had shown that their true power lay not in their technology or weapons, but in their determination to survive. Vrax clenched his fists. This would not be the end. The Galactic Fleet might have underestimated the humans, but they would not make that mistake again. There was still time to regroup, to recover, to strike back with everything they had left. Earth might be fighting for its survival, but Vrax had not yet given up on his conquest. The war for Earth was far from over, and he would see it through to the bitter end. The vastness of space seemed to close in around Vrax as he stared out at Earth from the observation deck of his flagship. The battle had taken a turn that no one had expected. His once mighty fleet was now cornered, battered by a human resolve that was unlike anything he had ever encountered. The human fleet, though smaller in number, was ferocious, precise, and relentless. They had not just adapted, they had turned the tide of the war, forcing the invaders to fight on their terms. The question that now haunted Vrax was whether his fleet could survive this unforeseen assault, or if it was already too late. The hum of the ship's engines was a constant reminder of the pressure bearing down on him. Vrax's mind raced, trying to piece together a strategy. His fleet had suffered significant losses. The humans, using their knowledge of Earth's terrain and their resourcefulness, had adapted faster than he had ever anticipated. It was clear, now, the invasion was no longer about just conquering a planet. It had become a battle for survival. "Commander, we've lost another 3 ships. Sorek's voice broke through the tension. His face was grim, his gaze locked on the screens that displayed the deteriorating situation. "Their countermeasures are proving more effective than we anticipated. We've already lost our lead ship in this sector, and we're unable to counter their new weapons." Vrax's knuckles whitened as he clenched his fists. "They're playing us, Sorek. They've been preparing for this moment for far longer than we realized. But we can't afford to lose any more ships. This is not a retreat we push forward. Their defenses are weakening." "Commander, I understand," Sorek said, his voice laced with doubt. "But the human fleet is relentless. We've seen their new weapons, energy pulses that disrupt our shields, smaller ships that harry our defenses, and now their underground forces have launched another attack. Our fleet is spread too thin." Vrax's eyes burned with frustration. Every calculation, every plan had been based on the idea that humanity would crumble under the weight of the alien fleet. Yet here they were, on the edge of defeat, and it was humanity that was proving impossible to break. For the first time in Vrax's career, he felt the crushing weight of doubt. He turned away from Sorek, his mind working furiously to find a solution. There had to be a way to tip the scales in their favor. But every move they made, every strike they launched, seemed to be met with a new surprise from the humans. They had prepared for everything, and they had done so with a ferocity that was impossible to ignore. Then, without warning, the ship's alarms blared. The screens around Vrax flashed red, signaling an incoming attack. The ground beneath him shook as the flagship rocked violently from a sudden explosion. "Status report," Vrax demanded, his voice sharp as his officers scrambled to assess the situation. One of the officers shouted above the noise, "It's the humans. They've launched another devastating attack, this time from underground. A blast hit our lower hull, causing significant structural damage. Return fire," Vrax commanded, his voice growing more urgent. "Fire everything we've got. We can't let them catch us off guard again." The flagship's massive cannons unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, aimed at the source of the attack. But the humans, ever unpredictable, had already moved, their underground forces retreating into hidden tunnels that spanned beneath the surface of the planet. They were ghosts, vanishing and reappearing in different locations. Each attack designed to wear down the alien forces until there was nothing left to fight for. Sorek turned back to Vrax, his face pale with dread. "Commander, we can't keep this up. We're losing control. The human forces are everywhere underground, in the skies, and even in the water. It's like they know our every move before we make it." Vrax's mind raced. There had to be a way to break their grip on Earth. He had been trained to lead armies, to conquer planets, to wipe out entire civilizations. Yet for the first time, he was up against something he had never encountered before, a species that not only fought back, but understood how to win. His eyes flickered to the screen showing the massive energy beam, still faintly visible from Earth's surface. The humans had been using this weapon to weaken the fleet's shields, to disrupt their systems, and now, it seemed to be growing in intensity. It was clear that Earth's core was powering the weapon, and the humans were leveraging their planet's resources in ways that no one had expected. "They're draining their planet's core," Vrax muttered to himself, piecing together what he had seen. "They're willing to destroy their world to defend it." Sorek, hearing the words, was stunned. "But that would be a sacrifice," Vrax finished. "But they will do whatever it takes to protect their future. And in that, they're more dangerous than any enemy we've faced." The realization hit Vrax like a thunderclap. The humans weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for their legacy. They were willing to sacrifice everything, their cities, their ecosystems, and even their very planet to stop the fleet. This was no longer a conquest, it was a war of ideals, and humanity had something to fight for that the Galactic Fleet had forgotten long ago. Vrax's eyes narrowed as he turned to Sorek. "We can't let them win. We need to strike at their heart. The energy source, the beam. It's the key. Sorek hesitated. But Commander, we've already seen how well defended it is. We can't approach it without risking everything. Then, we take the fight to them, Sorek, Vrax said, with renewed determination. We infiltrate, we take out their core energy source. We don't fight them head-on, we fight smart. A silence fell over the command center as the officers absorbed Vrax's words. The stakes had been raised. The battle for Earth was no longer just a matter of overwhelming force. It was a matter of outsmarting an enemy that had shown time and again that they were capable of far more than the fleet had ever imagined. As the fleet prepared to make its final push, Vrax couldn't help but feel a surge of admiration for the humans. They had proven themselves to be a worthy adversary. Now, it was time to finish what they had started. Prepare the fleet, Vrax ordered. We are going after their heart. We won't stop until Earth is ours. But we do it with precision, not brute force. The humans had grinned. And now, the Galactic Fleet would see just how far they were willing to go to win. The true battle was about to begin. The tension in the command center was palpable as the fleet gathered its final strength for what would surely be the most decisive moment of the war. Vrax had made his decision. If they were to conquer Earth, it would not be by force alone. This time they would strike at the very core of humanity's resolve, their hearts. But as he looked down at the planet below, still glowing under the power of the human defense, a flicker of doubt gnawed at the edge of his mind. Could they truly break the spirit of a people so determined to protect their world? The flagship's lights dimmed slightly, the hum of its engines, the only sound that filled the space. Vrax stood at the center of the bridge, his arms crossed, his eyes focused on the blue and green orb that seemed impossibly distant now. Earth had fought back with cunning, with desperation, and with every ounce of their ingenuity. It wasn't just a planet they were defending, it was their entire existence. Humanity had shown Vrax something he hadn't anticipated. They would never surrender. They would never fall, no matter the cost. Sorek's voice broke through the silence, sharp and clear. Commander, we're ready to proceed with the final assault. The fleet is in position. We've detected a weakness in their defense systems near the core of their energy beam. If we strike now, we can disable their weapon and crush the remaining resistance. Vrax's gaze shifted back to the screens. The energy beam that had wreaked havoc on his fleet was still pulsating, though its intensity had begun to wane slightly. It was a moment of vulnerability, a fleeting window. The humans might have been on the verge of victory, but they, too, had exposed themselves. We make this count, Vrax said, his voice firm. If we fail, the entire fleet will fall, and Earth will remain beyond our reach. But we will not fail. The crew around him moved with practiced precision, making final adjustments to the fleet's trajectory. But Vrax couldn't shake the thought that this final push wasn't just about overwhelming power, it was a gamble. A high-stakes game that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Earth had fought them off at every turn, had revealed a resourcefulness Vrax had underestimated. They weren't just defending a planet, they were fighting for their future, for their way of life. And in that, humanity had turned the war into something far greater than any of the alien fleets had imagined. Suddenly, the silence on the bridge was broken by a high-pitched beeping from the monitoring systems. Sorek stepped forward, his expression tense. Commander, we've just received another transmission from Earth. It's directed at the fleet. Vrax's pulse quickened. He had thought the humans would be too distracted by their desperate defense to make contact again. But if they were, speaking now, it could only mean one thing. They were preparing for something monumental. The transmission came through loud and clear. The voice on the other end was calm, almost eerily so, but the words carried the weight of defiance and determination. To the commanders of the Galactic Fleet, the voice began. You thought we would cower in fear. You thought we would bend, but we are not afraid. You came to conquer, to enslave, but we are not yours to control. Earth is not a prize to be claimed, and you will not take it from us. Vrax's eyes narrowed as the transmission continued. You underestimated our strength, our resolve. Now you will learn what happens when you challenge humanity. We fight not because we have to, but because we choose to, and we will not lose. The transmission ended abruptly, and for a moment, all was silent. Vrax stood motionless, processing the words that had come through. There was no plea for mercy, no plea for retreat. The humans weren't begging for their lives. They were declaring war on the invaders, pushing back with every ounce of strength they had. Their spirit was as much a weapon as their advanced technology. Sorek glanced at the commander, his voice barely a whisper. Commander, they know we've reached the point of no return. They're preparing for our final assault. Vrax's mind raced. The humans had already given everything they had in this war. Their cities lay in ruins, their military had fought with every weapon at their disposal, and still, they stood firm. They had fought not just for their survival, but for the very soul of their species. Vrax realized that this wasn't just a conquest anymore. This was a clash of wills, a test of who could endure longer, who could sacrifice more, and who would stand at the end of it all. "We strike now," Vrax said, the determination in his voice stealing with each word. "We take the energy source, we cripple their defenses, and we break their will. Earth will fall." The fleet surged forward, weapons primed and shields at full power, but Vrax couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in his chest. Every time they had pushed, the humans had found a way to push back. Every move they made was met with a defense he had not predicted, an answer to every attack. The humans had turned the battlefield into their own advantage, shifting tactics when needed, adapting and overcoming obstacles with relentless creativity. And now, as the fleet descended closer to Earth's core, it felt like they were walking into the heart of humanity's fight. The final assault began as the fleet's warships neared the heart of Earth's defenses, their weapons charging up for the devastating blow that would shatter the human resistance. But as they closed in, a sudden surge of energy pulsed through the ground beneath them. It was as if the entire planet was fighting back, pushing them away with the full force of its natural power. And then it hit, an explosion of energy so intense that it shook the very fabric of space itself. The flagship rocked violently, and for a moment, Vrax was thrown from his feet. The lights flickered, and the ship groaned under the force of the impact. The screens before him flashed red as the fleet's systems went haywire, struggling to compensate for the sudden blast of energy. "We've been hit. Shields are failing," Sorek shouted. Vrax staggered to his feet, his heart pounding. The human defense had just escalated to a level no one had predicted. Earth wasn't just defending itself, it was fighting back with the full force of its natural power, using the planet itself as a weapon. The energy beam that had once been a small flicker was now a full-scale weapon, and humanity had used it to turn the tables. The question was no longer whether the fleet could conquer Earth, was whether they could survive long enough to retreat. In that moment, Vrax realized that the true battle wasn't one of might. It was a battle of resilience, a fight for survival against an enemy that refused to be broken. The war was far from over, but Earth had just proven one thing: humanity would not go down without a fight.